The fading ceremony was supposed to be the greatest moment of Senna Vale's life. Instead, it became her public execution. When Corvin Ashford's eyes met hers across the sacred circle, when the moon's light confirmed what the ancestors had chosen, she'd felt joy surge through her chest, her fated mate, the man she would spend eternity with. But Corvin's expression held no joy, only disgust. I, Corvin Ashford, heir to the Thornwood Beta line, reject you, Senna Vale, as my fated mate. The words shattered something inside her. The bond, that golden thread she'd felt connecting them, snapped like a bone breaking. Senna gasped, clutching her chest as pain ripped through her. The crowd waited for her to beg, to fall to her knees, to plead for him to reconsider. Instead, Senna lifted her chin, turned her back on the man the moon had chosen for her, and walked away. She didn't know that Alpha King Sorin Valdrin of Valdoria stood in the shadows, watching. She didn't know that her dignity in that moment had caught the attention of the most powerful wolf in the realm, and she certainly didn't know that by morning he would offer her everything Corvin had just destroyed: a crown, a kingdom, protection, under one condition: he would never love her. Neither of them understood what her rejection would awaken. Neither knew that the bond Corvin had shattered wasn't broken at all. It was waiting, and when it finally revealed itself, it would either save them both or destroy everything. The sacred fire crackled in the center of the clearing, casting dancing shadows across 500 faces. The fading ceremony happened once every 3 years, when unmated wolves gathered beneath the blood moon to discover their destined partners. Senna had dreamed of this night since childhood. She stood among 32 unmated females, her heart hammering against her ribs. Her gown was borrowed, a pale silver thing that had belonged to her mother before she died. It was the only nice thing Senna owned. Nervous, whispered Yara, the blacksmith's daughter beside her. Terrified, Senna admitted. The elder raised his staff, and silence fell. The moon sees all, he intoned. The moon knows all. Tonight, she will reveal the bonds written in your souls, since before you were born. One by one, wolves stepped forward. One by one, the moonlight illuminated pairs, revealing fated mates with golden light that connected their hearts like visible thread. When Senna's name was called, her legs nearly gave out. She walked to the center of the circle, feeling every eye upon her. The daughter of a disgraced noble house, the girl whose mother had died under mysterious circumstances. The girl people whispered about when they thought she couldn't hear. The moonlight touched her skin, warm and ancient. And then it moved, stretching across the clearing toward the gathered males. It stopped on Corvin Ashford. Senna's breath caught. Corvin was beautiful, dark-haired, strong-jawed, from one of the most powerful families in Thornwood Pack. And now the moon declared him hers. The golden thread appeared, connecting her heart to his. She felt it like warmth spreading through her chest. This was it. This was everything she'd hoped for. But Corvin wasn't smiling. His face twisted with revulsion. He stared at the golden thread as if it were a snake coiling around him. His mother, Oriel, stood behind him, her lips pressed into a thin line of fury. No, Corvin said. The word fell into the silence like a stone into water. Corvin, the elder warned. The moon has spoken. You cannot. I can. Corvin's voice rose, hard and cold. I, Corvin Ashford, heir to the Thornwood Beta line, reject you, Senna Vale, as my fated mate. The pain was instantaneous. Senna felt the golden thread rip from her chest as if someone had reached inside her and torn out a piece of her soul. She staggered, gasping, her hand flying to her heart. The agony was beyond anything she'd ever experienced. Physical, emotional, spiritual, all at once. Around her, people gasped. Some looked horrified, others looked satisfied, as if this was exactly what the daughter of Mirella Vale deserved. Corvin stepped back, his expression settling into careful blankness. His mother's hand landed on his shoulder, possessive and pleased. The crowd waited. They waited for Senna to crumble, to beg, to throw herself at Corvin's feet and plead for him to reconsider. That's what rejected wolves did. That's what broken things did. But something strange happened inside Senna. Beneath the pain, beneath the humiliation, something stirred. Something that had always been there, sleeping in her blood, waiting for this exact moment. Senna straightened her spine. She lifted her chin, and though tears burned behind her eyes, she refused to let them fall. "Then I accept your rejection," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands, "and I release you from any claim the moon placed upon your soul." The formal words of acceptance, the words that made the rejection complete and irreversible. Corvin's eyes flickered with something. Surprise? Regret? It was gone too quickly to name. Senna turned and walked away from the sacred circle. She didn't run. She didn't stumble. She walked with her head high, her silver dress trailing behind her like armor. The crowd parted for her, silent and staring. She was almost to the tree line when she felt it. A presence. A weight of power so immense that her wolf, even broken, even bleeding inside her, recognized it instantly. Senna turned. And there, standing in shadows that seemed to bend around him like loyal subjects, was a man who shouldn't have been there at all. Tall. Devastatingly handsome. Hair black as midnight falling past his shoulders. Eyes the color of molten amber, fixed on her with an intensity that made her forget to breathe. Alpha King Sorin Valdrin of Valdoria, the most powerful wolf in all the realms, the ruler of an empire. The man whose kingdom made Thornwood Pack look like a collection of mud huts. What was he doing here? A hint of amusement tugged at the edge of his expression, almost admiration. He'd been watching her. She realized it with sudden certainty. He'd seen the whole thing. "Your Majesty," the elder sputtered, finally noticing the king's presence. "We had no idea you were... We would have prepared." "That won't be necessary," Sorin said. His voice was deep and cold, like a river running beneath winter ice. "I came for one purpose, and I found what I was looking for." His amber gaze never left Senna's face. "Her," Sorin said. "I want her." The clearing erupted into chaos. Senna sat in a carriage she didn't own, wearing a gown stained with grass from when she'd nearly collapsed after the ceremony, being driven toward a destination she'd never imagined. The Alpha King's castle. 2 hours ago, she'd been rejected by her fated mate in front of everyone she'd ever known. Now she was traveling through the night with the most powerful man in existence, who'd claimed her in front of the same crowd that had watched her humiliation. The absurdity of it threatened to choke her. "You haven't spoken since we departed," Sorin observed. He sat across from her in the carriage, taking up far too much space, his long legs almost brushing hers. Most women would have questions. "Most women aren't claimed by kings an hour after being rejected," Senna managed. "True." That hint of amusement again. "Then again, most women beg when they're rejected. They don't walk away as if their dignity matters more than their pain." Senna's hands clenched in her lap. "My dignity is all I have left." "Is it?" Sorin tilted his head, studying her with those unnerving amber eyes. "I wonder." The carriage jolted, and Senna gripped the seat. Through the small window she could see the landscape changing, the familiar woods of Thornwood giving way to wider roads, more prosperous villages, and grander estates. "Why me?" The question burst out before she could stop it. "You could have anyone, princesses, noble women, wolves from powerful families. Why choose a rejected nobody?" Sorin's expression didn't change. "You're not a nobody. You're Morella Vale's daughter." Senna froze. Her mother's name. He knew her mother's name. What do you know about my mother? She whispered. Enough. Soren's voice gave nothing away. Enough to know that what Corvin Ashford threw away tonight is worth more than his entire bloodline combined. Before Senna could demand answers, the carriage crested a hill, and her words died in her throat. Valdoria Castle rose from the landscape like something out of a fever dream, towers of white stone, gardens sprawling in every direction, walls that could withstand armies, and surrounding it all, a city that glittered with lights even at this late hour. This was where he wanted to bring her. This was what he was offering. Here are my terms, Soren said quietly. I need a queen. Not for love, never for love, but for heirs, for alliance, for the stability of my kingdom. You will marry me, you will bear my children. You will have every luxury you could imagine, protection that no one could breach, and a crown that will make every person who ever looked down on you kneel at your feet. Senna's heart was pounding. And in return? In return, you will ask nothing of me emotionally. We will not share a bed except when necessary for conception. We will not pretend affection. You will be queen in title and in comfort. But you will not be my love. I am incapable of offering that. The words should have hurt. After everything, after Corvin's rejection, after years of feeling unwanted, she should have been devastated by such a cold proposal. But Senna heard something beneath his words. Not cruelty, not dismissal. Something else. Something that sounded almost like warning. Why are you incapable? She asked quietly. Something shifted in Soren's amber eyes. For just a moment, the mask slipped, and she glimpsed something raw underneath. Then it was gone. That's not your concern. If I'm to marry you, shouldn't I know what I'm binding myself to? You're binding yourself to safety, Soren said flatly. To power. To a life where no one will ever reject you again, because rejecting the queen is punishable by death. Is that not enough? Senna thought of Corvin's face, of his mother's satisfied smile, of her father, who hadn't even stepped forward to defend her when the rejection happened. She thought of her small room in the crumbling estate, of the whispers that had followed her since childhood, of the loneliness that had been her only constant companion. Cold over cruelty, she thought. I'll choose cold over cruelty every time. I accept your terms, Senna said. Soren's eyes widened slightly. Whatever he'd expected, it wasn't immediate acceptance. You don't wish to negotiate? To ask for time to consider? What is there to consider? Senna met his gaze without flinching. You're offering me more than anyone ever has. You're not asking me to love you, which means you won't be disappointed when I can't. And you're not promising to love me, which means I won't be destroyed when you don't. She paused, something bitter twisting in her chest. I've already had the experience of being promised love and having it shattered. Your honesty is a gift, Your Majesty. Most people don't have the decency to tell you up front that they'll never care for you. Soren stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, something genuine surfaced in his expression. Not quite a smile, but close. You're not what I expected, Senna. What did you expect? Someone broke in. His amber eyes gleamed in the dim carriage light. Someone I could control easily. Someone who would be grateful and pliable and pose no challenge whatsoever. Senna's chin lifted. I'm sorry to disappoint. On the contrary. Soren leaned back against the seat, his expression unreadable once more. I find myself intrigued. The way he said it made something warm flicker in Senna's chest. She quickly smothered it. Don't, she warned herself. Don't mistake interest for care. Don't make the same mistake twice. But as the carriage rolled through the gates of Valdoria Castle and Soren's hand brushed hers, helping her down, cool fingers, surprisingly gentle, she felt it again. That strange awakening in her veins, that sense of something dormant beginning to surface. Whatever was happening, whatever Soren knew about her mother that he wasn't telling her, Senna had a feeling her life would never be the same. She just didn't know yet whether that was a promise or a threat. The wedding negotiations took place in a room larger than Senna's entire family home. Soren sat at the head of a long marble table, two advisors flanking him. Morning light streamed through windows that stretched from floor to ceiling, illuminating tapestries worth more than some kingdoms. And at the far end of the table, looking like he wanted to murder someone, sat Senna's father. Aldrich Weil had arrived at dawn, summoned by the king's messengers. He hadn't looked at Senna once, not when he'd entered, not when she'd taken her seat near Soren, not even now, as the contract was being discussed. Shame curdled in her stomach. Even here, even as she was about to become queen, her father couldn't bring himself to acknowledge her. "The terms are straightforward," Soren announced, his voice cutting through the tension. "Senna Vale will become Queen of Valdoria. She will receive lands, titles, income, and protection that extends to anyone she claims as family." His amber eyes flicked to Aldrich, and something cold entered them. "Though I suspect she won't be claiming many." Aldrich's jaw clenched. "Your Majesty, I must protest this union. My daughter is... she is not suitable for..." "Your daughter?" Soren interrupted, his voice dropping to something dangerous. "Walked away from her own rejection with more dignity than I've seen from wolves with 10 times her status. She is more than suitable. She is exactly what I want." Senna's heart stuttered. She knew he didn't mean it romantically. She knew this was political, strategic, and cold by his own admission. But hearing him defend her, when her own father wouldn't. "Furthermore," Soren continued, "any suggestion that she is not suitable implies that something is wrong with her. I find myself curious, Lord Vale, what exactly you believe is wrong with your own daughter." Aldrich's face reddened. "I merely meant..." "Choose your next words carefully." Soren's voice was soft now, which somehow made it more terrifying. "Very carefully." Silence stretched. Aldrich's mouth opened, closed. For the first time Senna could remember, her father had nothing to say. "The contract," Soren said to his advisors. "Proceed." The terms were read aloud. Senna would become queen. She would receive a crown, a separate household, personal guards, and an income that made her eyes water. In exchange, she would provide heirs and attend royal functions. "And the question of love?" one advisor asked delicately. "The contract explicitly states that there will be none," Soren finished. "Senna has agreed to these terms. Is this still agreeable to you, my lady?" Every eye turned to her. Senna nodded. "It is, Your Majesty." "Then sign here." She signed. Her father signed as witness, his hand trembling with barely suppressed rage. The advisors signed, stealing glances at their king as if trying to understand his reasoning. And then it was done. Senna Vielle, rejected wolf, unwanted daughter, was going to be queen. As the advisors filed out, as her father stalked toward the door without a backward glance, a commotion erupted in the hallway. "You cannot enter. The king is in negotiations. I don't care if he's in audience with the gods themselves. Let me through." Senna's blood ran cold. She knew that voice. The doors burst open, and Corvin Ashford strode in, his dark hair wild, his eyes blazing. Behind him, looking furious at being outmaneuvered by a mere beta's son, the guards scrambled to catch up. "Senna!" Corvin's gaze fixed on her with an intensity that hadn't been there last night. "Senna, you can't do this." Soren rose slowly from his chair. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. "Lord Ashford," Soren said, his voice deceptively mild, "you were not invited to these proceedings." "I don't need an invitation." Corvin moved closer to Senna, his expression desperate. "Senna, please. Last night was a mistake. I was confused. My mother, she pressured me. She said things that..." It doesn't matter. I felt the bond between us. I still feel it. You can't marry him. Senna stared at her former fated mate. 12 hours ago, those words would have brought her to her knees. 12 hours ago, she would have wept with relief and forgiven everything. But 12 hours ago, she hadn't yet met Soren's amber eyes across a dark clearing. She hadn't felt the strange stirring in her blood. She hadn't been defended by a king when her own father stayed silent. You rejected me, Senna said quietly. You broke our bond, in front of everyone. I know, and I'm sorry. Sorry? Something hot and unfamiliar rose in Senna's chest. You're sorry? Do you have any idea what it felt like? The bond ripping out of my chest? The humiliation of 500 people watching and waiting for me to beg? Corvin flinched. Senna. I didn't beg. Her voice strengthened. I walked away. And you know what happened then? A king saw me. A king decided I was worth something. Where were you, Corvin? Where were you when I needed someone to see my worth? I'm here now. Too late. The words hung between them. Corvin's face crumpled. For a moment he looked like the boys she'd grown up with. The boys she'd secretly loved before she ever knew they were fated. But then his expression hardened into something uglier. You don't know what you're getting into, he hissed. You don't know what runs in your blood, Senna, what your mother really was. Senna went rigid. What does my mother have to do with... Ask him. Corvin jabbed a finger toward Soren. Ask your precious king why he really wants you. It's not for your dignity. It's not for your pretty face. There's something in you, something sleeping, and when it wakes up... Enough. Soren's voice cracked through the room like thunder. He moved so fast Senna barely saw it. One moment he was by the table. The next he had Corvin by the throat, lifting the younger man clean off the ground. You rejected her, Soren said, his voice terrifyingly calm. You broke your sacred bond. You have no claim here, no right to speak her name, let alone make demands. Corvin clawed at Soren's grip, his face purpling. But more importantly, Soren continued, leaning closer, you will not speak of things you don't understand. You will not frighten her with half-truths and rumors, and you will never set foot in my kingdom again. He released Corvin, who crashed to the marble floor, gasping. Guards, Soren said, not raising his voice. Escort Lord Ashford to the border. If he resists, you have my permission to be persuasive. As the guards dragged Corvin away, his eyes found Senna's one last time. Don't trust him, Corvin gasped. Whatever he's told you, whatever he's promised, it's not about you. It's about what's inside you. And when you find out the truth... The doors slammed shut, cutting off his words. Silence fell. Senna stood frozen, her heart racing. What runs in your blood? What your mother really was? Something sleeping. Ignore him, Soren said, his voice carefully neutral. He's a desperate man, grasping at anything to hurt you. But Senna turned to face the Alpha King, and she saw something in his amber eyes that hadn't been there before. Caution. What did he mean? She asked quietly. What's inside me that you want? Soren held her gaze for a long moment. Then he looked away. The first time he'd been unable to meet her eyes. Some questions, he said slowly, are better answered after the wedding. It wasn't a denial. It wasn't an explanation. It was a warning. And as Senna followed him out of the chamber, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just agreed to marry a man with secrets as deep as her own. Secrets that might consume them both. The morning of her wedding dawned gray and cold. Senna stood before a mirror that stretched taller than two men, barely recognizing the woman staring back at her. The gown was white silk embroidered with silver thread, worth more than her father's entire estate. A delicate crown of moonstone and diamond sat upon her dark hair, catching the light with every small movement. She looked like a queen. She felt like a fraud. You're trembling, my lady, observed Hesper, the elderly maid who'd been assigned to her. Unlike the servants in Thornwood, Hesper treated Senna with genuine warmth. "Are you cold?" "Nervous," Senna admitted. "That's natural." Hesper adjusted a fold in the gown's train. "Every bride trembles on her wedding day, even queens." But Senna wasn't trembling because of the wedding itself. She was trembling because of what Corvin had said 3 days ago. "What's inside you?" What your mother really was. Something sleeping. She'd asked Soren twice more since then. Both times, he'd deflected with that same careful neutrality. "After the wedding," he'd said, as if the ceremony would somehow make the truth easier to bear. "It's time, my lady." Senna took a breath and walked toward her future. The Cathedral of Valdoria was ancient and enormous, its vaulted ceilings painted with scenes of wolves running beneath a silver moon. Thousands had gathered, nobility from across the realm, dignitaries from allied kingdoms, common folk pressed against the outer walls hoping for a glimpse of their new queen. As Senna entered, a hush fell over the crowd. She felt their stares like physical weight. Whispers rippled through the pews. "That's her? The rejected one? I heard she was fated to the Ashford heir. Why would the king choose her over Princess Maricel of the Eastern Isles?" Senna kept her eyes forward, fixed on the altar where Soren waited. He stood perfectly still, dressed in black formal attire that emphasized his broad shoulders and narrow waist. His midnight hair was pulled back from his face, revealing the sharp angles of his features, and his amber eyes were locked on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. She reached the altar. Soren extended his hand, and she took it. Cold. His skin was cold, just as it had been in the carriage. Not cool like someone who'd been outside on a winter morning. Cold like stone. Cold like something not entirely alive. The high priest began the ceremony. Senna barely heard the words. She was too aware of Soren beside her, of the weight of the crown on her head. "If any person knows of a reason why these two should not be joined," the priest intoned, "speak now, or forever hold your silence." A commotion at the cathedral doors. "I object." Senna's heart stopped. But it wasn't Corvin who swept down the aisle. It was his mother. Lady Oriel Ashford moved through the crowd like a snake through grass, her face twisted with righteous fury. Guards tried to stop her, but she was a noble. They couldn't simply tackle her in the middle of a royal wedding. "This union is a mockery," Oriel declared, her voice carrying to every corner of the cathedral. "That woman is the daughter of Morella Vielle, a known practitioner of forbidden arts. She carries tainted blood. She is unfit to be queen." The whispers exploded into full murmurs. Senna felt the blood drain from her face. "Furthermore," Oriel continued, "my son was her fated mate. She carries the stain of rejection. A rejected wolf cannot ascend to the throne. It's against the natural order." This was it. This was the moment everything fell apart. But then Soren moved. He stepped forward, placing himself between Senna and Oriel, and the temperature in the cathedral dropped so sharply that Senna could see her own breath. "Lady Ashford," Soren said, his voice soft and terrible. "You seem to have misunderstood your position." Oriel faltered. "Your Majesty, I only meant—" "You meant to insult my chosen bride, in my cathedral, on my wedding day." Soren's amber eyes glowed with something that didn't look entirely human. "You meant to repeat baseless accusations about a woman who has been dead for 12 years, and you meant to suggest that the moon's authority supersedes mine." He took another step forward. "I am Alpha King of Valdoria. When I choose a queen, she becomes queen. When I declare her worthy, she is worthy. And when someone insults her—" His voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried further than a shout. "They insult me." Oriel stumbled backward, her face pale. "Guards," Soren said calmly. "Escort Lady Ashford to the border. She is banished from Valdoria. If she returns, she will be executed for treason. As Oriel was dragged away, screaming protests that grew fainter with distance, Soren returned to Senna's side. He took her hand again and squeezed gently. "Continue," he told the priest. The ceremony resumed, but Senna barely processed any of it. He'd defended her, publicly. Banished a noble for insulting her. Why? Why would he do that for a woman he'd promised never to love? "Do you, Soren Valdrin, Alpha King of Valdoria, take this woman as your wife, your queen, your mate?" "I do." "And do you, Senna Vale, take this man as your husband, your king, your mate?" "I do." Her voice came out stronger than she expected. "Then by the authority vested in me, I pronounce you bound in the eyes of the moon and the realm. You may seal your vows with a kiss." The cathedral went silent. Soren turned to face her fully. His cold hands rose to cup her face, his thumbs brushing her cheekbones with surprising tenderness. He leaned close. So close she could see the gold flecks in his amber eyes. But he didn't kiss her lips. Instead, his mouth pressed softly against her forehead, lingering there for a long moment. The gesture was protective, almost reverent. He was giving her control, letting her set the pace, not taking anything she wasn't ready to give. "Thank you," she whispered. Soren's lips curved slightly. "Don't thank me yet." He leaned close again, his mouth brushing her ear as he whispered words meant only for her. "What Oriel said about your mother isn't entirely wrong, and when you discover what you truly are, you may hate me for not telling you sooner." Before Senna could respond, he pulled back, took her hand, and turned them both to face the cheering crowd. She was queen now, and she had no idea what that really meant. The wedding feast lasted for hours. Senna sat beside Soren at the high table, accepting congratulations from nobles she didn't know, eating food she couldn't taste, and replaying his whispered words over and over in her mind. "What you truly are. You may hate me." By the time the feast ended and servants escorted her to the royal chambers, Senna's nerves were wound so tight she thought she might shatter. The room was enormous. A canopied bed dominated the space, hung with curtains of deep crimson. Fires burned in 2 separate hearths. A team of maids helped her change into a nightgown of white silk that left her feeling exposed and vulnerable. Then they left, and she was alone, waiting. A soft knock at the door made her jump. "Come in," she managed. Soren entered, and Senna's breath caught. He'd changed from his formal attire into simpler clothing, dark trousers, a loose white shirt unlaced at the throat. His hair fell freely around his shoulders. In the firelight, he looked almost approachable. Almost. He closed the door behind him with a soft click. "You're frightened," he observed. "Should I not be?" Soren studied her for a moment. Then he moved to a small table near the window, where a tray held wine and glasses. "I brought something," he said, reaching into his pocket. He withdrew a small vial filled with silvery liquid. "It will help you relax if you wish. It won't cloud your mind. Just ease the tension." He set it beside the wine glasses, making no move to bring it to her. "The choice is yours," Soren continued, "as is everything that happens tonight. I need an heir. We both know that, but not at the cost of your comfort. If you'd prefer to wait, we wait." Senna stared at him. This wasn't what she'd expected. She'd expected coldness, efficiency, a man claiming what was contractually his. She'd braced herself for duty without tenderness. Instead, he was giving her choices she didn't know she had. "Why are you being kind?" she whispered. "You said this was purely contractual, that you'd never love me. Why do you care if I'm comfortable?" A shadow passed across Soren's face. "Because I know what it's like to have choices taken away. I won't do that to another person." The weight of those words hung between them. Slowly, Senna rose from the edge of the bed. She walked toward him, watching his amber eyes track her movement. When she reached him, she took the vial from the table, uncorked it, and drank. The effect was immediate, a gentle unwinding of the knots in her chest. "I don't want to wait," she said quietly. "I want to understand what this is. What we are." Soren's expression shifted. Something hungry moved behind his careful control. "Then we'll go slowly," he said, "and you'll tell me if anything is wrong." She nodded. He reached for her, and Senna gasped at the cold of his touch. His fingers were like ice against her heated skin, tracing the curve of her shoulder. "You're so cold," she breathed. "Does it bother you?" "No." And strangely, it didn't. The contrast of his cool touch against her warmth created sensations she hadn't expected, sharp and electric. Soren's hand moved to her face, tilting her chin up. His eyes searched hers for a long moment. "You're not afraid of me," he observed. "Should I be?" "Yes." The word was barely a whisper. "Everyone should be afraid of me." "Then why aren't I?" He didn't answer. Instead, he kissed her. His lips were cold like everything else about him, but the kiss itself was anything but cold. It was slow, deep, consuming, as if he were drinking her in. Senna's hands found his chest, and she felt something strange through the thin fabric of his shirt. Scars. Not just a few. Many. Raised lines crisscrossing his skin in patterns too deliberate to be from battle. When she tried to trace them, Soren caught her hand. "Not yet," he murmured against her mouth. "Some things need time." He guided her backward toward the bed. When her legs hit the mattress, he lowered her gently, his body covering hers. The weight of him was surprising. The coldness of him even more so. It was like being embraced by winter itself, but winter that somehow cherished her. They moved together slowly, Soren checking constantly, watching her face for any sign of discomfort. And when they finally joined, she gasped at the sensation of cold meeting warmth. "Is this—" Soren's voice was strained, his control clearly fracturing. "Tell me if this is too much." "Don't stop," Senna breathed. He didn't. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the darkness. Soren's arm was wrapped around her, holding her close against his cold chest. His heart beat beneath her ear, slow, steady, but somehow wrong. The rhythm was off, as if it were struggling against something. "Soren," Senna whispered. "Your heart." He tensed. "It's nothing." "It doesn't sound like nothing." She propped herself up to look at his face. "Please, tell me what's wrong." For a long moment he said nothing. Then, "There are things about me, about my bloodline, that I can't explain yet. Not because I don't want to, but because knowing too soon might put you in danger." "What kind of danger?" "The kind that has killed every king who dared to love, and destroyed every queen who inspired that feeling. They were blamed, hunted, executed for bewitching the crown." Senna's blood ran cold. Soren reached up to touch her face, his cold fingers gentle against her cheek. "I should go," he said quietly. "Before I—" He stopped mid-sentence. His hand dropped from her face. Something shuddered behind his eyes. "Before you what?" Senna pressed. Soren shook his head. He pressed a kiss to her forehead and slid out of bed. "Sleep well, my queen." He dressed quickly and left without looking back. Senna lay alone in the massive bed, her mind racing with questions. Every king who dared to love, every queen who inspired that feeling. What had happened to them? Weeks turned into months. And despite every promise of coldness, despite every warning about loveless arrangements, something began to grow between them. It started small. Soren appearing at her chambers before dinner, staying to eat with her instead of in the formal hall. Conversations that stretched from politics to philosophy to childhood memories neither of them had shared with anyone else. She learned that he loved the smell of rain on stone, that he read poetry in secret because kings weren't supposed to care about such things, that he'd had a younger sister once, Marin, who died when he was 16. He learned that she could identify any plant by scent alone, a skill her mother had taught her, that she dreamed of flying, though wolves couldn't fly, that she'd never told anyone about the strange warmth that sometimes bloomed in her chest when emotions ran high. He came to her bed more frequently now. Not just for airs, they both knew that excuse had worn thin, but because something drew them together despite every rational objection. And each time, Senna noticed things, how his cold skin grew warmer against hers, as if her body heat was seeping into him, how his heartbeat seemed to steady when she pressed close, how he looked at her sometimes with an expression that bordered on wonder. "You're changing me," he whispered one night, his mouth against her hair. "I don't know how, but you are." Senna's heart clenched. "Is that bad?" A long pause. "It should be." One morning, Senna woke to nausea. At first, she thought it was the rich food. But when the sickness continued for a week, when certain smells made her gag and certain foods made her weep with inexplicable craving, she sent for the royal healer. The confirmation came within the hour. She was pregnant. Senna sat alone in her chambers, her hand pressed against her still flat stomach, trying to process the enormity of it. A child. Soren's child. The heir they'd contracted for, yes, but also something more, something real. When Soren arrived that evening, earlier than usual, his eyes went immediately to her hand on her belly. "You know," she said softly, "the healer informed me." He crossed the room in 3 strides, falling to his knees before her chair and taking her hands in his cold ones. "Senna, is this—" She'd never seen him like this. The careful control was gone. In its place was raw, unfiltered emotion, hope, fear, joy, all tangled together. "I'm happy," she admitted. "Are you?" "Happy doesn't cover it." His voice was rough. He pressed his forehead to her joined hands and she felt him tremble. "I never thought— I didn't believe—" "Soren?" He looked up, and there were tears in his amber eyes. "Every king in my line has been told they'd never know love," he said quietly, "that it's impossible for us, that we're destined to rule alone, to father heirs with women who mean nothing to us, to die without ever—" He stopped, drew a breath. "But you mean something," he continued. "You mean everything, and this child, our child." "Soren." Senna cupped his face, her thumbs brushing away the tears he probably didn't realize he was shedding. "What are you saying?" He rose, lifting her from the chair and into his arms. His kiss was desperate, hungry, full of everything he'd promised not to give her. "I'm saying I was wrong," he breathed against her mouth. "I said I couldn't love you. I said I was incapable. But I—" His eyes met hers, and Senna saw it all. The walls he'd built, the walls that were crumbling. "I love you," Soren said. "Moon, help me. I love you, and I should have told you sooner. And I—" He stopped. His face went white. "Soren!" Senna's joy curdled into fear. "What's wrong?" His hand flew to his chest, clawing at his shirt. His eyes went wide with pain. Not emotional pain, physical agony. His knees buckled. "No," he gasped. "Not now. Not—" "Soren!" He collapsed. Senna fell with him, catching his head before it hit the floor, pulling him into her lap. His skin was colder than she'd ever felt it. Cold as death. His lips were turning blue. Frost was spreading across his chest, visible through the fabric of his shirt. "Help!" Senna screamed. "Someone help! The king is dying!" Guards burst through the door. Healers were summoned. Chaos erupted. But all Senna could see was Soren's face, pale as snow, his amber eyes flickering with fading light. "Should've told you," he managed, his voice barely a whisper. "The curse. My bloodline. If we love, truly love." His body convulsed. "We die." His eyes closed, and the frost kept spreading. 3 days. 3 days of sitting vigil beside Soren's frozen body. 3 days of watching the frost spread from his chest to his throat, his arms and his face. 3 days of barely sleeping, barely eating, refusing to leave his side. The healers had given up on the first day. "There's nothing we can do, Your Majesty," the head healer had said. "This isn't a natural illness. It's a curse, ancient and powerful, beyond anything we've ever seen." But Senna refused to accept that. She sat beside his bed now, holding his frozen hand, watching his chest rise and fall in shallow, labored breaths. He was still alive. Barely. The curse was killing him slowly, as if it wanted him to suffer. "I won't let you die," she whispered. "Do you hear me? I won't." A knock at the chamber door. "Enter," Senna called, not looking away from Soren's face. Footsteps approached. A woman's voice, old and weathered. "You sent for someone with knowledge of ancient curses, Your Majesty?" Senna turned. The woman standing before her was ancient, white-haired, stooped, with eyes that seemed to hold centuries of secrets. Power radiated from her like heat from a flame. "You're the witch from the eastern reaches," Senna said. "They call you Thessaly." "They do." Thessaly moved closer to the bed, her keen eyes examining Soren's frozen form. "And you're the girl with the sleeping light in her blood. I've been waiting for you to call." Senna's heart lurched. "You know what I am?" "I know what your mother was." Thessaly's gnarled hand reached out, hovering over Soren's chest without touching. "And I know why this curse was placed on his bloodline, and why only you can break it. Tell me, please." Thessaly lowered herself into a chair, her old bones creaking. "Centuries ago," she began, "the first Alpha King of Valdoria was a brutal man. He conquered, he killed, he ruled through fear. But there was one thing he couldn't control, his own heart. He fell in love with a woman, a witch named Avara, who had the power to heal any wound, to bring light to any darkness." Senna listened, barely breathing. Avara was gentle, kind, everything the king was not. And he loved her so fiercely that it frightened him. Love made him weak, he thought. So he did something unforgivable. Thessaly's voice hardened. He had Avara killed, murdered by his own hand, so that love could never control him again. Senna's stomach turned. That's monstrous. It was. And Avara knew it was coming. Thessaly's eyes glittered. So before she died, she cursed him. Cursed every king in his bloodline. They would be incapable of love, or if they somehow found it, love itself would kill them. Their hearts would freeze. "Soren," Senna breathed, looking at her husband's frozen face. "Every king since has either been cold and loveless, or died the moment they dared to feel. Soren's father died the same way. Fell in love with Soren's mother, confessed it, and was dead within a week." Tears burned in Senna's eyes. "Then there's no hope. The curse can't be broken." "There is one way." Thessaly leaned forward. "Avara wasn't just any witch. She was the last of a specific bloodline. Healers who could channel pure life force, light made manifest. Her magic was unique." "Was," Senna repeated, "until your mother." The world tilted. "Your mother, Mirella, was Avara's descendant," Thessaly continued. "The bloodline survived in secret. And you, Senna, inherited everything she had." Senna shook her head. "I don't have any magic. I've never." "It was bound." Thessaly's voice was sharp. "Bound when you were a child, before your power could fully manifest. Someone knew what you were. Someone wanted to make sure you could never break the curse." "Who?" That's the question, isn't it? Thessaly rose, moving toward the door. Find who bound you, and you'll find your answer. But do it quickly, child. Your husband has days at most. Wait, Senna stood. How do I unbind my power? Thessaly paused at the threshold. The binding was physical, she said. A seal, placed somewhere on your body when you were too young to remember. Find the seal, break it, and your power will awaken. She turned to leave, then hesitated. One more thing, Thessaly said softly. Your mother had secrets, child. More than just her bloodline. She hid things, people, to protect them from those who would do harm. But that's a story for after you've saved your king. Then she was gone. A seal, somewhere on her body. Senna moved to the mirror across the room, her heart pounding. She examined her arms, her hands, her legs. Nothing. She turned, craning to see her back. There. Just below her left shoulder blade, so faint she'd always assumed it was a birthmark, was a symbol. A circle with a line through it. The ancient sign of binding. Someone had sealed her magic when she was a child. Someone had known what she was. And then, it hit her. Auriel Ashford. Auriel, who had pushed her son to reject Senna. Auriel, who had burst into the wedding screaming about tainted blood. Auriel, who had known about Morella Vielle. Auriel, who had been at Senna's childhood home as a guest countless times. Who had been alone with infant Senna while the adults dined. The pieces clicked into place with horrible clarity. Auriel had bound her. Auriel had spent decades ensuring that Senna would never be able to save a king. What mattered now was breaking the seal. Senna grabbed a knife from the bedside table, a small blade meant for cutting fruit. She reached behind her, feeling for the raised symbol beneath her skin. I'm sorry, Soren, she whispered. This is going to be messy. She pressed the blade against her flesh and cut. Pain seared through her. Blood ran hot down her back. But she kept cutting, tracing the symbol, breaking the seal that had imprisoned her power for 23 years. Light exploded behind her eyes, and suddenly, Senna understood everything. Power flooded through her veins like liquid sunlight. Senna gasped, falling to her knees as 23 years of suppressed magic burst free. She could feel everything now. The life force in every guard outside the door, in every servant in the castle, in every blade of grass in the gardens below. And she could feel Soren. His life force was a guttering candle, barely flickering, moments from extinction. The curse was a dark ice wrapped around his heart, squeezing, freezing, and killing, but now she could see how to fight it. Senna staggered to the bed, pressing her hands against Soren's frozen chest. Light bloomed from her palms, golden and warm, seeping into his icy skin. Come back to me, she commanded. Do you hear me, Soren? Come back. The frost resisted. It was old magic, powerful magic, forged from centuries of pain and betrayal. It didn't want to release its prey, but Senna was Avara's heir, and Avara had created this curse, which meant Avara's bloodline could unmake it. She pushed harder, pouring everything she had into the light. Memories flashed through her mind. Her mother's gentle hands, her mother's soft voice, her mother's secret lessons that Senna had thought were just games. Feel the warmth in your chest, little one. That's your light. That's your power. Someday, you'll use it to heal the world. I understand now, Mama, Senna whispered, tears streaming down her face. I finally understand. The light intensified. The frost began to crack, and then the chamber doors burst open. Stop! Auriel Ashford stood in the doorway, wild-eyed and disheveled. She must have bribed her way past the border patrols, slipped into the castle during the chaos of the king's collapse. The banished noblewoman's face was twisted with fury and fear. Behind her, guards looked uncertain about whose orders to follow. Seize her, Auriel commanded. She's using forbidden magic on the king. She's trying to kill him. The guards hesitated, looking between Oriel and their glowing queen. I'm trying to save him, Senna said, not removing her hands from Soren's chest. Which you've spent decades trying to prevent, haven't you, Oriel? Oriel's face went pale. You bound my magic when I was an infant, Senna continued, her voice steady despite the power coursing through her. You knew what I was. You knew I could break the curse, and you've done everything in your power to stop me. You don't understand, Oriel hissed. The curse is necessary. It keeps the kings of Valdoria cold, controllable. Without it, they become drunk on love, on emotion. They make foolish decisions. They destroy kingdoms for women who don't deserve. You mean they become human? Senna interrupted. They feel. They care. They rule with hearts instead of ice. Exactly. Oriel's composure cracked. Do you know what happened the last time a king loved? Soren's father started a war for his wife. Thousands died. Love is weakness. The curse protects everyone. The curse is murder. Senna's light pulsed brighter. Every king who dared to feel has died. Every queen who inspired that feeling has been blamed, hunted, destroyed. My mother... Her voice broke. You killed my mother, didn't you? Silence. Then Oriel smiled, and it was the ugliest thing Senna had ever seen. Morella was getting too close to the truth. She'd figured out what her bloodline could do. I couldn't let that happen. So you murdered her, and made it look like an accident. I protected the realm. Oriel's voice was cold. And when I realized you'd inherited her power, I bound you. You were supposed to live and die as a nobody, never knowing what you could have been. But Soren chose me anyway, Senna said quietly. He saw something in me that you couldn't destroy. A mistake I'm here to correct. Oriel lunged, but she never reached the bed. Light exploded from Senna's body, a shockwave of pure life force that threw Oriel backward into the far wall. The guards scattered. The windows shattered. For one brilliant moment, the entire castle blazed with golden radiance. And when the light faded, the frost on Soren's chest was gone. His eyes opened. Senna? His voice was hoarse, confused. What? Later, she breathed, falling forward into his arms. I'll explain everything later, just, you're alive. You're alive. Soren's arms wrapped around her, strong and warm. Warm, not cold. His skin had color again. His heart beat steadily against her ear, no longer struggling. The curse, he whispered. I felt it break. How did you? I'm Avara's descendant. Senna pulled back to look at his face. The witch who cursed your bloodline? I'm her great-great-great-granddaughter. My blood is the cure. My power is the antidote to everything she created. Soren stared at her with wonder. That's why I was drawn to you, he breathed. That's why I couldn't stay away, couldn't keep my heart cold. Your very presence was healing me, even when your magic was bound. And now it's unbound. Senna pressed her forehead to his. And the curse is broken. Not just for you, for your whole bloodline. Our child will never suffer. It's over, Soren. It's finally over. Guards had surrounded Oriel, who was struggling against their grip, screaming obscenities. What should we do with her, Your Majesty? One guard asked. Soren's eyes hardened. He rose from the bed, still weak but steady, and crossed the room. Oriel Ashford, he said, his voice carrying the full weight of royal authority. You are guilty of binding a royal bloodline heir, murdering Morella Vale, conspiracy to commit regicide, and treason against the crown. The sentence is death. Oriel spat at his feet. You'll destroy everything. Love makes you weak. Love saved my life. Soren cut her off. Love broke a curse that has plagued my family for centuries. Love gave me a queen who is stronger, braver, and more powerful than any enemy I've ever faced. He glanced back at Senna. Love is not weakness, Oriel. It's the only thing that ever really mattered. He turned away. Take her to the dungeons. She'll be executed at dawn. As the guards dragged Oriel away, Soren returned to Senna's side. He took her hands in his, warm hands now, and lifted them to his lips. I owe you everything, he said quietly. My life, my heart, my kingdom. You owe me nothing. Senna smiled through her tears. Just love me. That's all I've ever wanted. That, Soren said, I can do for the rest of my life. 6 months later, the gardens of Valdoria Castle had never been more beautiful. Senna walked through the roses, their scent filling the warm spring air. In her arms, wrapped in a blanket of pale gold, was her son, Kalin Soren Valdrin, Crown Prince of Valdoria, born with his father's amber eyes and his mother's dark hair, and absolutely no trace of any curse. There you are. Senna turned to see Soren approaching, still looking at her like she was something miraculous. After 6 months of marriage, 6 months of freedom, 6 months of love without fear, he still looked at her that way. Someone was fussy, Senna said, bouncing Kalin gently. He wanted to see the flowers. Like his mother. Soren wrapped an arm around her waist, pressing a kiss to her temple. Always seeking beauty. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching their son's eyes track a butterfly dancing among the blooms. So much had changed. Oriel had been executed, her crimes exposed to the realm. Corvin had fled to the eastern reaches, banished and stripped of his family's titles. The Ashford name had been struck from noble records entirely. Senna's half-sister, a girl named Lyrian, who'd been hidden away by their mother before her death, had been found and brought to court. Thessaly had been right. Morella had secrets, had hidden people to protect them. Senna and Lyrian were still learning each other, still healing from the secrets that had separated them, but there was love there, real love. And Senna's father? Aldrich Vale had come to court 2 months ago, seeking reconciliation. Senna had met with him once, listened to his excuses, his justifications, and his belated remorse. Then she'd sent him away. Some wounds couldn't be healed, some bridges couldn't be rebuilt. And Senna had finally learned that she didn't owe forgiveness to people who had never deserved her love in the first place. What are you thinking? Soren asked. Senna leaned into his warmth. I'm thinking about that night at the fading ceremony, when Corvin rejected me. Soren's arm tightened around her. If I ever see him again? No. Senna shook her head, smiling. That's not what I mean. I'm thinking about how I felt in that moment, how I thought my life was over, how I couldn't imagine anything good coming from that much pain. She looked up at her husband, at the man who had seen her dignity when everyone else saw her shame. And now I have everything, she whispered. A crown, a kingdom, a son, and a love that literally broke an ancient curse, all because I walked away instead of begging. Soren cupped her face in his hands. You taught me something that night, he said. Something I'd never understood before. That strength isn't about power or dominance or control. It's about knowing your worth, even when everyone around you is trying to convince you that you have none. He kissed her softly. You knew your worth, Senna. You always did. And I was just wise enough to see it. Kalin cooed in her arms, breaking the moment with a sound so pure and innocent that they both laughed. Come on, Soren said, taking the baby from her. The council is waiting. Apparently, there's some matter of establishing a new sanctuary for descendants of Avara's bloodline that requires the Queen's attention. Senna grinned. Lead the way, Your Majesty. They walked back toward the castle together, king, queen, and crown prince. A family forged from rejection and redemption, from curses broken and love reclaimed, Behind them, the roses swayed in a gentle breeze, and somewhere, in whatever realm the dead occupied, Morella Vale and Avara both smiled. The curse was broken, the bloodline was free, and love, real, true, impossible love, had won.